and they're like, oh, I feel this. And then from there, I can just, sometimes things just flow as soon as you get a jump start. So it really created such I mean, from that, like an electric energy in the room that I truly feel like you can hear in the music. Hello, hello.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing good. Sorry for my lateness.
Oh, no worries at all. Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
No problem.
My name's Adam, and this is a podcast about you and your journey in music. And we'll talk about the album coming out as well.
Yes, let's get into it.
Cool. So are you from Vallejo, Northern California?
Yep, I'm from Vallejo, California. And then I also partially grew up in Sacramento, California as well.
Okay. I was from San Diego. I'm in Nashville now, but I was born and raised in San Diego. And I spent about 5-6 years up in the Bay Area and knew Vallejo pretty well.
Dope.
Yeah. What was it like growing up in Vallejo? I mean, you're kind of close to San Francisco and Oakland and that area ish. Yeah.
Ish.
You have Six Flags.
Right. That's about it. So, I mean, growing up in Vallejo is very small townish. I mean, it wasn't even over 100,000 people there when I was growing up there. Very much so homey type of vibe of being able to have like your friends and your uncles and aunts and cousins and people down the street. Very simple and low-key, kind of like a country life. In my opinion, Vallejo is like very country. I mean, most of the Black folks that moved there came straight from like, either Louisiana or Georgia. So it's a very country city. Not much going on, but I still had a good childhood.
That's good. Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, they had Six Flags. What's that bridge that you can go over from the East Bay?
Carquinez Bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't Six Flags when I was growing up, though. It was Africa Safari USA.
Really? What was
there
that?
There
was it like
were
a
no
zoo?
rides.
Like what's it, like a safari? Okay.
It was just a zoo. And then when I got, I want to say maybe around 3rd or 4th grade, then it ended up being Marine World because we ended up getting Shamu whale there for a while. So we had Shamu, and then we had another whale. So it ended up being Marine World after that because that was our biggest attraction. And we got a couple rides, not a lot of rides. And then the city ended up getting the contract with Six Flags to put all the other rides and expand the amusement park.
Wow, that's so interesting. Just from being from San Diego, we probably gave you Shamu. I mean, we had SeaWorld.
I think y'all did, because we had Shamu for a while. We had another whale. I can't remember the name of the other whale, but yeah, I think y'all did. I can't remember the other one, but that was like our main attraction. Literally the only thing to do in Vallejo. There's really nothing else to do.
Sure. I went to Six Flags there a couple times.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, that's awesome. I didn't realize when I was just I remember E40 was from Vallejo as far as music is from Vallejo. But I didn't realize her is from Vallejo as well.
Yeah, she's from Vallejo. Mac Dre is from Vallejo. CC Sabathia, the baseball player, is from Vallejo as well.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yep, he's from Vallejo.
So there's a scene there. Yeah. I didn't I just knew when I was up there it was. But when I was growing up, when I was there, it was E40, like, oh, E40's from Vallejo. Like that was what I knew.
It's pretty much still that. I mean, outside of the fact, like we have her now.
I was gonna say her must be that's a solid, flex right there.
Exactly. So, I mean, there's more folks doing things from Vallejo now too. I mean, we have La Russell, who's a rapper from Vallejo, who's doing some amazing things. So, even now, I think with social media too, people just having more visibility of like who is doing what that's from that city. Mm-hmm. But before then, yeah, your pride and joy was E40. As soon as people found out you were from there, they're like, are you, like, people would ask, are you from Magazine Street? Because E40 is from Magazine Street. Like, are you from Magazine Street? I'm like, no, I'm not. But like a
There's
city
only
is
one
made up
street in
of,
Vallejo.
yeah, like the city's made up of multiple streets. I promise you, I'm not from there, but
Oh, that's
yeah,
so funny. Yeah, that was the one thing I knew. E40. That was everyone talked about that. Oh, if you're Vallejo, oh, E40, man, they're from
yep,
there.
yep, got something.
That's cool. Well, that is so you grew up singing. From what I read, you grew up in the church.
Mhm.
Is how old were you? Did you start singing? You came from a musical household, correct?
Yeah, so my mom's a choir director. I mean, I started singing as young as I could remember. I believe when I first joined the children's choir, I was about like 6 years old. So I started singing there in a choir and just kind of continued singing in choirs until I got into high school. So that was my start with music, other than like singing around the house with my siblings.
Hmm. Did you write music at this time or not until later?
No, I didn't start getting into writing music until I was in high school, and it was not that great at all. But I mean, we would kind of like freestyle songs, me and my siblings. I at that time didn't look at that as writing, but intentionally writing didn't come until I was around like 16 years old.
Okay. But
Yeah.
prior to that, it was chorus or choirs that you're in. Was like with your mom being the choir director, was that something that all your siblings did, or was it she
Yeah.
kind of knew, okay, or if she went off
Yep.
who she thought could sing or not, or I'm sure
Oh
they
no.
probably can all sing, right?
Oh no, everybody was in the choir, even if you didn't sing, even if you
Okay.
couldn't, everybody was in
Mandatory.
it. Yeah, it's like a all participation thing. That's kind of just how it was at our church in general. If you were a kid going to our church, you were in the children's choir.
Oh, interesting.
Hmm.
Okay. That's cool
Yep,
though. Gets you
yep,
up on stage in front of people, I would imagine that was helpful.
definitely great practice.
What about instrument? Do you play an instrument?
No instruments. I've learned piano a little bit, guitar a little bit. I know a little bit of something, but I don't actively play.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at 16, when you start writing songs, are you writing lyrics and melodies and like how and what kind of drew you towards songwriting?
I just knew that I wanted to do music. So it's like I didn't even know that that was an option to have somebody write something for you, or like that just didn't come to mind for me. Um, I always have been pretty expressive. I have wrote poetry even as a child and did like poetry competitions as a kid. So for me, it was like, oh, bet, like we're just kind of taking the poetry and applying that with melody. And then just growing up in a musical household and in the church, just naturally melody just kind of got embedded in me. So I started just coming up with stuff, and it wasn't that great, but it was something. It got me going. It got me exercising my gifts. So, I'm thankful for it. But yeah.
Mhm. Well, being like you said, you entered poetry contests and stuff like that. Like, was it, were you nervous at all to show people your work or your songs, your lyrics? I mean, to be vulnerable enough to enter a contest for poetry, maybe that wasn't such a big deal to you, or is it, or was it?
I mean, I've always had and still have a nervousness attached whenever I perform or I'm putting myself out there. But um I think because I always practice being in front of crowds, just starting off with choir, and because of the way that it was introduced to us, it wasn't introduced as a big deal. And we
Mm,
were encouraged. So it was like, you could do this, like you could do it. So yeah, I would be nervous, but I was actually just really excited to share my art as a kid. So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being able to do it. I wouldn't say that I was incredibly shy. So
mhm.
even though I had that nervousness, it's something that I've always learned to just push through.
Mhm. And having that experience through your church, getting on stage and singing in front of people, was that different when you were singing your own songs? And did that happen when you were in high school? Did you perform any of your own songs?
In high school, I did not perform any of my own songs. I ended up getting into musical theater and into
Oh,
vocal
cool.
ensemble, which was just like our competitive choir at the time. So I mainly sang classical or jazz standards, or whatever musical I was in. I would be singing, the music of whatever role I got.
Mhm.
But at that time, that was kind of the start, the the day and age of people releasing music on MySpace. So I had like
Mm.
released one song on MySpace. And then I think I deleted it after a while. I was like, oh my God, no. But I was not in a place of feeling comfortable to perform my own music, but I did perform other songs and different standards and things. Just being a part of different competitions and
Sure.
different extracurricular like clubs that I was in.
Then did you go to school for music, like college for music as well?
I ended up going to school for vocal jazz. I ended up dropping out, but I did end up going to school for it and minored in theater.
Okay. And were you like, what did you drop out because of something that, you know, happened as far as a music career path, or just got sick of it? Or, I mean, I guess.
No, it honestly was a money thing. I mean, I
Okay.
came from a single parent home. I was having to work full time in order to fund myself through college.
Yeah, it's tough for
And it
sure.
really just didn't make any sense for me to get a degree for something that truly is nurtured by you getting out there and making your own relationship. So I just felt like the degree was pointless. And I'm not really good at investing in things that I'm not passionate about. So I didn't see myself getting a degree in anything else if I was to get one. So I just dropped out.
Yeah, I mean, that makes the most sense. You'll hear, or I've interviewed a lot of artists that went to like Berkeley, right, a school of music, and then they'll drop out like second year, third, you know, second
Mhm.
semester in, because it's they get either get a gig or realize, oh, I'm already kind of doing what eventually I would want to do once
Oh
in four
yeah,
years from now anyway, or whatever.
exactly. And if you get
Okay.
that opportunity, it's like you can't miss that. I mean, I have a childhood friend, my mom's best friend, her son and I were born 2 weeks apart,
Oh,
and he
wow.
does music as well. And he also was in school for music and ended up getting an opportunity overseas to play. And he's like, should I drop out? And I had already dropped out. I'm like, yeah, drop
Of
out
course
and
you
go,
should.
go do the gig. And I
Yeah.
mean, and he did it. And I mean, he has a Grammy now, and who knows
Wow.
if that would have been his path. So, it can definitely be a fruitful journey if you just invest in the craft itself. Cause I'd rather have done it my way now than be here and then also be in so much debt trying to get that $10,000 from Biden.
Yeah,
I think
right.
I think I made a good decision.
I would agree with you.
Yeah.
That's funny. So you when you or when you ended up deciding to drop out, you drop out of school, were you already releasing music at this point, or still
I was
working
like,
on your songwriting?
I was in pursuit. I was working on my songwriting. A random fun fact about that is that like I didn't know if I wanted to do R&B or soul or anything. Just growing up in a church, I felt very conflicted about the type of music I was making. So I thought I was going to be a gospel singer, and I was like doing demos to try to get out there. I didn't really know anything about like the music industry outside of like, that book that you get of here's the music business. And even then, I don't feel like that book entirely helped me. But
Yeah, it was like
um,
written in the 80s, and you're
yeah,
like,
I was
how is
doing
this
like
relevant to anything we're doing now?
not entirely. It had nothing about social media in there. It
Right,
had
of
nothing about
course.
right. And so I was just doing like demos. I was writing a little bit here and there, but immediately after I dropped out, I was still just trying to figure out what the hell I was doing as an adult. It was a very
Mhm.
conflicting time of like, okay, I feel empowered to do my creative, but also where are you gonna live? Bills are due. And so
Yeah, there's
uh,
a reality as well
yeah,
that goes along with it.
I was trying to figure it out in the background, just doing miscellaneous things, open mics and things like that.
What was the like big break, or the big milestone that kind of changed the trajectory of that for you?
I personally think it didn't come until a few years later, until by the time I was like 22,
Mhm.
21, 22, when I started just fully investing in my music. I had been in a collective of artists that I had worked with from like 19 to 21, and we were making music together and releasing music together. And that was cool, but I was trying to force that situation, and then finally got enough courage to invest in my own music. And I started a band. Actually, I started a band at 21 and was living in Sacramento. So I got to do a lot of shows. That was the thing about being in music and still till today, it's easy to get gigs and bars in different places as a band versus being like a solo singer having tracks. So
Right.
I started a band and was able to get a bunch of gigs around Sacramento and was gigging almost every weekend. And that kind of felt like my big break of like, okay, I think I can actually do this. And yeah, from there, I just kept progressing and started releasing more music after that.
With the band or just under your own name?
Just under my own name, yeah.
Okay. And you
Yeah.
eventually make it to LA, or did you move to LA or are
Yeah.
you still living? Okay.
Yeah, I moved to LA in 2016. So I moved to LA when I was 25 years old. So a few years later,
Did the
and lived there
band
for 5 years.
did the band like fizzle out, or did you like, how did that jump happen?
Yeah, I mean, with the band, it was kind of like we all enjoyed doing it. It was comprised of a few of us that actually was in jazz band with each other in high school.
Oh, cool.
That was just kind of the conversation of like, hey, like I'm gonna go to LA for my music. None of them never wanted to pursue music. They just enjoyed doing it. So by the time it got to a point in my career that I felt like, hey, y'all, like I need to go, everybody, just sent their congratulations and well wishes, and that was just the decision that was made, and it fizzled out from there.
I've heard this before with artists, and it makes sense where a band is hard to keep together, right? I mean, it takes 3, 4, 5 people that
Oh,
all have the
absolutely.
same passion and the same, North Star, so to speak, of like where they want to get, right?
Right.
Whereas if that's what you want to do, you're like, oh, that's all I care about. And maybe somebody's like, well, I kind of want to, get this full-time job at this whatever
Mhm.
finance agency. Like, there's just like so many different avenues, and to be the one that's like, no, this is it. Like, this is all I care about. I have no backup. Like, this is
Yep.
my plan. And it's hard to find a group of people to do that. So I hear a lot of artists that are like, well, I just had to, cut ties with them, and I went
Yeah.
down to LA.
Yeah.
That must have been a scary jump though.
It was definitely scary, but it was on time. Like I knew that it was time for me to go. So I feel like the fact that I had that internal confirmation made me at least feel some sort of comfort. And I'm just not one to do anything or stay anywhere that I don't want to be or do anything that I don't want to do. Like I knew that I was, I had kind of reached every milestone in that city that I wanted to. And I essentially kind of use that as like practice
Mhm.
and nurturing my, my craft as much as I could there. And so it was time for me to go. I also knew that I never wanted to be presented as a singer in a band. That was just something that we all knew at that time, that if we want to get more gigs and be able to kind of like push the agenda of me as an artist, it would be best for us to have a band. So at that time, our name was The Function. So we weren't under a band name. We were Zyah Belle and The Function. So the band had their own
Oh,
name, but
gotcha.
the name was always presented as separate. So it wasn't like a thing of like, okay, like this is so sad that I have to like break from y'all because now I can't push this band. It was just, we knew that it was a
Uh,
expiration date at some point.
Got it. Yeah, because it was always your name. It was Zyah Belle and The Function. So it wasn't just like you guys were called this, whatever,
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
Function, for example, and then
Yeah.
you leave the band. It was
Yep.
all, sounds like it was all under you what you were trying to do anyway. So
Yep.
you get to not New York, you get to Los Angeles, and where do you start? You get there and it's like,
Um,
okay, start knocking on doors. Do you have
well,
a contacts there, or?
yeah, yeah. At that time when I was in Sacramento, I still was heavily connected in the Bay Area and was wanting to get a little bit more into songwriting. I knew at that time that songwriting is a great way to get in the room first, rather than like getting in the room as a featured artist is typically harder. And so I had connected with Mr. Fab, who's a rapper from Oakland, but also a songwriter who has worked with like Snoop Dogg and Eric Bellinger. And so, at that time, he was very accessible for me. And I'm like, let me know how these things work, how these writing rooms work. So I would go to his studio in the Bay whenever I had time when I was living in Sacramento before moving. And we ended up making a good amount of songs, like a catalog of songs. And he sent over a few songs to Snoop Dogg. at that time, Snoop Dogg was trying to get music together for his daughter, for her to release. And then he also sent some things over to Too Short, to the rapper Too Short.
Yeah, I love
And
Too
they
Short.
both enjoyed my music. Snoop ended up picking one of the songs, and I ended up connecting with him. I ended up going down to Los Angeles before moving and getting to meet Snoop and record at his studio, and then also meet Short. So Mr. Fab helped really nurture some relationships there. On top of the fact that I had a mentor at that time that was from Sacramento. She's still my mentor, who's from Sacramento, Jessica Jolia, who's a singer and vocal coach. And she was living in Los Angeles already, actively touring, very tenured in the industry. So I came out there with a few folks to be able to reach out to before I actually moved, which was kind of the plan too. I didn't want to go out there completely high and dry.
Sure.
But also being from California was easier for me. I mean, it's technically moving from city to city. So I knew a good amount of people in LA before moving there, because that's kind of the thing of like, oh, okay, if you don't live in the Bay, you probably live in LA if you're in California. So I knew a lot of people that had made that transition.
Sure. Which is so interesting to me, just because I recently moved to Tennessee, where it's like from San Francisco to LA or San Diego, that's like between roughly 7 hours, say. I mean, in 7 hours, I could drive like through 3 states, on the East Coast. So it's like, oh, California from San Francisco to LA, but it's like there's not a whole lot in between that giant chunk of those 2 huge cities.
Right.
Which is just funny to like when I talk to people around here, they don't understand that. Like, oh, so you were really close to San Francisco? Like, no, that was like 10 hours away.
Yeah, like California on the bill every year has a proposal to be split up into
3 sections, I think.
States. So I mean,
yeah,
California is huge, but then when you're from California, your mindset and your concept of travel is even different. So for me, when you say it's like 7 hours, I'm like, oh, okay, because I've done that
it's no big deal, right?
Yeah,
right. I feel the same.
like so many times versus now, where I actually live in Portland, Oregon now, where Vancouver, Washington is 10 minutes away. And I'm like, what?
That's crazy.
Literally when you're driving, your GPS is like, welcome to Washington. Like it literally tells you, I'm like, oh shit, this is crazy. I'm not used to stuff like this.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. That's so funny. Yeah, because if you're driving, just to jump on that, just because it's funny, if you go east to the east end of Tennessee, you have to go through Georgia at one point. Like, so you're in Georgia for like 10 minutes. It's like, welcome to Georgia. And then 10 minutes later, it's like, welcome to Tennessee. You're like, what?
California is like, we literally are it's a whole nother world.
It really is.
No, seriously.
Yeah. So you're in LA. Did I see, or did I read that you worked with Sunday Service, with Kanye's Sunday Service?
Yeah, so I moved to LA 2016. I ended up getting the gig for Sunday Service in 2019 and did that all the way through until the pandemic started. And yeah, that was probably one of the biggest highlights of my journey in Los Angeles and my first experience with touring.
Wow. Did you get to play that Coachella that he did?
I actually came on right after Coachella. So fun fact about Coachella is, even though there were 200 people up there, only about 20 of them were actual singers. And then the others were just dancers. But then after Coachella, he said, I actually like the look of 200 people being up there. Can we get 200 singers? So then he ended up expanding to, I think, like 80 singers. And then I came on during the 80.
Oh, wow. I interviewed somebody. I was trying to look to see who it was that was a part of Sunday Service too, but now I can't think of what his name was.
It's a few of us. I mean, Alex Lee was a part of Sunday Service, India Shawn, Javante. It's a few actual recording artists that were a part of Sunday Service as well.
Yeah, I forgot his name. I'm just like spacing right now. Did Sunday Service a lot. I thought that's so cool. So you had a chance to do that, and were you releasing music of your own? I would imagine, right, in 2019. Yeah.
Yep, I actually have released an album while I was on the road with Sunday Service. I had released the album 9 in September 2019, and so I was still actively working in my career as a performing artist while still being on the road. So even sometimes when I would have breaks in between Sunday service, I would do my own shows in Los Angeles as well.
Okay. And then you put a record out again in 2021, the most recent album, but you have a new album coming out in a couple weeks, right?
Yep. So I ended up putting out that record. Actually, that was like towards the beginning of like the pandemic with in 2021 when I had released that record.
Oh, really? So was that an album you're working on during the pandemic, or were there songs that are already finished?
I ended up working on that during the pandemic. So literally right before they started to like, because you know, when everything first started off, they started to shut things down.
Oh, yeah.
So right before things really started to shut down, I was just like, yo, I'm gonna get crazy if I can't be able to do music. So I ordered an interface and a mic and just started like recording on Instagram Live every single day and was just recording music. So I was still able to release music because it's nothing to send files to somebody to go mix it in their home and, you know, work on the cover art in your home and us be able to come together and release this thing. So I was making music, you know, in my studio apartment and releasing all of this music following the pandemic.
So who's listening anyway? Those vocal takes are from your apartment?
Yeah, I recorded
Oh,
those myself.
wow.
The only song that wasn't recorded by me was Say My Name.
Interesting. That's so cool. That's really, I mean, it's bizarre, not bizarre, but it's so awesome what you can do nowadays with technology to record like a record that I mean, you would never tell if it was in $1 million studio or your own bedroom. Like it's so cool to have that capability nowadays.
Yeah, it definitely got me through those times of having to stay within my four walls. So yeah.
Well, okay. Well, tell me about this new album. Comes out, you have 2 songs out off of it thus far, correct?
Yep. So I have 2 singles out now, D&D and Not the One. And the album drops on September 9th. It's titled Yam Greer, which I'm super excited about. A lot of what I do as far as my creative is just kind of allowing things to come together. And that's exactly what happened with this album of like, you know, the name itself kind of being given to me in a funny, joking way. And then me kind of going from there, like, okay, like this is my Sasha Fierce, like this is my, you know, alter ego. And okay, we're gonna go off of that and even kind of gain inspiration from that name and that time of the 70s and the Blaxploitation era, and being able to really inject some of that into the music and in the production. So I'm super excited because my last project, like I said, I recorded, you know, 95% of it myself in my room on my bed. And then this album, I was, you know, able to come back together safely and collaborate with some of my friends and new artists to create this album. So it's a whole new energy, I feel like, that is behind it, because a lot of people that collaborated on this project, this was one of the largest, you know, sessions that they've been able to have in a while, or even feel comfortable attending since, you know, the start of the pandemic. And so it was really beautiful to get that creative flow off of one another in a really traditional 70s type of way, where everybody would show up to the studio and you maybe got 1 or 2 takes because that's the only amount of tape you had, and everybody just came in and jammed and made a record. And essentially we channeled that same energy for this project. So we
That's really
recorded it in
cool.
2 weeks and really we were on a roll. So I'm super excited to introduce this to the world.
That's awesome. Was it like writing the previous one, Who's Listening Anyway, compared to this? Like, I mean, how much of a difference does it make being in a room with other people and having that collaborated process versus did you write everything else in your room just by yourself? Like, you mean
Yeah.
recording by yourself? Like
So
what were the differences there?
a lot of what I was doing was, if I needed any like extra, because sometimes when you're writing, and this is kind of what I've learned to do, is that when you're writing, sometimes you can get all in your head of like, oh, do I want to say that word? You know, you kind of overanalyze, and that is kind of analysis paralysis for an artist. You're most likely going to hit a writer's block. So when I was writing by myself in my room for Who's Listening Anyway, I would get on Instagram Live and I would literally tell people, like, if you hear a line or something that I should say next, like drop it in the comments, whatever. And so
that's
I was
cool.
virtually collaborating with people, which even resulted in like a song that I did on there called Or What, that I was able to collaborate with an artist from Canada, who found my live and was able to give me like a couple lyrics. And I'm like, bet, send me your publishing info. Now, technically you co-wrote this song with me.
That's
But
cool.
I'm not able to feel someone's energy through the screen. It's different when you're in the same room and there's this excitement of like, oh, okay, yeah, we should say that. Or, oh yeah, this song does feel like that. So the difference was just the energy that was put into the creative was so different. And my ability to also be able to be supported by so many different creatives. You know, I would be able to hear production and go, I really like this, but I don't hear lyrics just yet. Versus when you're by yourself, sometimes you might force the creative. But I was able to give that and say, I really like this production, but I don't really know what to say. But I got 3 other writers in the room and they're like, oh, I feel this. And then from there, I can just, sometimes things just flow as soon as you get a jump start. So it really created such I mean, from that, like an electric energy in the room that I truly feel like you can hear in the music.
That's awesome. I'm excited for the album to come out. I had a private stream sent to me, and it's such a cool album. And I love the production on it. It's definitely it does have that like 70s ish vibe to it that I didn't even put that together when I first listened to it until you said that. I was like, oh, that's where I'm hearing like that.
Yeah.
It's got some really cool elements to it. I saw an Instagram video of you, like you're like in Houston or something, and you just wrapped up a tour and you have the champagne bottle out. Like, are you doing another tour to support the record once it comes out?
Yeah, so actually we were able to announce today that I'll be supporting India Shawn on another tour starting September 29th. So super
Wow.
excited, not planned at all, but things just kind of divinely work in that way where, whereas I was able to support Alex Isley on her tour and perform things from Who's Listening Anyway, as well as the newer singles. Now I'll be able to tour with this new album as I support India Shawn. So super excited to go on the road and be able to perform this music, because that's my favorite thing, to be able to translate things live.
I love it. I love it. Well, I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much, Zyah, for doing this. My last question to you is if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
If I could give a word of advice for aspiring artists, I would encourage you to give yourself grace. Your journey, your success is not on a timetable. Certain things will happen specifically because you put in the work, and some things will happen just by happen chance of luck. It is a combination of both. It is a beautiful twisted combination of divine things happening and preparation meets opportunity, and those things take time. So give yourself grace, because it might not happen exactly when you want it, but it will happen exactly when it's supposed to.